A piece of plastic takes up to 1,000 years to break down, which means that every piece of plastic that you've ever touched is still here.
Welcome to The Human Factor, the show where we explore social change through the eyes of social entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders. My name is Melanie Russen, her name is Erin McCabe, and we are your hosts. Our guest today has worked with some of the world's biggest names in beverage, including Lion Nathan, Coca-Cola, and Schweppes. He has also owned and exited a number of startups in the marketing and technology space before he became the CEO and co-founder of social enterprise Water3. During his travel overseas, Damien was shocked at the enormous amount of waste created by single-use plastic bottles. So in 2011, Damien and his business partner founded Water3 right here in Australia as a way to address the plastic epidemic. So from as little as $1, Water3 kiosks allow us to refill our reusable water bottle on the go. Hi, Damien, and welcome on The Human Factor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the show. Please fill in the gap in my intro and tell us how you would describe yourself.
So, social entrepreneur is a relatively recent term for an industry that really sort of based around profit with a purpose. So I look at, I've looked at many different business opportunities over the years, and the one thing I keep coming back to every time is about personal fulfillment, and social enterprise just really resonates with what I am and my values as a person. It's about if you have an opportunity or a way to make a difference to the planet in a positive fashion, then you've got a responsibility to do it. There's a word in Māori where I come from in New Zealand called tēnā tingatanga, which basically means guardianship. So what that means is you don't own this planet, but you're its guardian. And so while you're here, it's your duty to look after it. And that I guess resonates through most stuff that I've done. I've owned businesses where it hasn't been necessarily a social or hasn't been social enterprises. It's just been about money making, and the enthusiasm wanes really quickly. You make a profit, and then it's like, well, now what? What's the actual point of that? And so starting a social enterprise around water for me resonated because it's something to make a difference to the planet. I used to teach scuba diving, so I've got an affinity with water. And I figured out a way to do it better and to deliver water to people in a better way that was being done with plastic water bottles. It's an industry that hasn't been disrupted in 30 years, but it's creating a massive problem. Just today, the Ipswich City Council basically said, hey, residents of Ipswich, we're really sorry, but we're not taking your recycling anymore. It's all going to landfill. So our biggest problem isn't recycling and learning how to recycle. It's learning about how to reuse or just not create the problem in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was hiking in Nepal once, and when you get to a certain point of altitude, they say you can't bring plastic bottles up here anymore. One, because it's really hard to get them up there, but then it's really hard to get them gone. Which I've been sharing that with a friend of mine who's going to Nepal now, and she's like, oh, what? I didn't even think about it. So it's one of those things that's part of our lives that we don't even have a thought about. So I understand that you are currently wearing a few hats inside of Water3, but also outside of Water3. So I'm sure that no day is the same for you. But tell us, if you could, what a typical day might look like for the founder of a company like Water3.
Unfortunately, for the last 18 months, it's often getting up at stupid early o'clock to catch a flight somewhere. With what we've been doing, there's quite a bit of interest in what we do. So my role has been both, getting in amongst the weeds and looking at the detail of all aspects of this business. So today has been about just getting to the bottom of some developing our new website, which should go up in a couple of weeks, and seeing where the gaps are around that, looking at our service protocols. You're going to have issues with our machines. You're going to have issues. It's the nature of any kind of mechanical piece of equipment. So putting some protocols in place around, how we respond to service events if and when they happen. But then I'll be on the phone to the US negotiating a license agreement. I'll be talking with another company around potential integration of a cryptocurrency. Then doing something like an interview like this. Then a lot of it really for me is probably spending my time mentoring and leading my staff. Even though we're a water company and we're sitting in that automated retail space, this business is built by its people, and it's it doesn't look like it because you're just getting a water refill seems pretty simple, but the level of complexity and behind what we're doing is fairly phenomenal. We've got almost 60 staff now, so managing and mentoring and leading those people is probably the number one thing that I do for most of the day.
And I think that's very important because the one of the difficulty for social entrepreneurs is we tend to be involved in a lot of different things, but actually leading our people is probably one of the key role of an actual founder or CEO. So that's very interesting. What is the one thing, Damien, that most people don't know or understand about plastic waste? Because we talked briefly about the barrier that some people might face in changing their habit. So what would be some of the thing that we don't know or understand about the barrier that people face in changing those habits of just filling up their water bottle on the go?
So the biggest challenge for government and I guess environmentalists has been trying to convince people to change their behaviours away from buying plastic bottles to refilling from a tap. That's the biggest challenge. And I met someone about 2 years ago who said, I want to work with you on branding the tap water of a certain city council. And I said to her, look, I've branded many beverages in my time, from water to soft drinks to coffee to alcohol, wine, milk powder, and I've even branded cat food, but you can't brand tap water. Tap water, it comes out of a tap. It's like I'm trying to brand the clouds. There's no value, intrinsic value in it. So a brand is a set of values. So the values would be, if you've got let's take, for example, how many people wear Rip Curl or something like that, but have never surfed in their life. What they're trying to do is tell everybody, this is who I am as a person. The values of that brand reflect the values that I want to portray to the world. And you just can't do that with tap water because there is no brand, there is no value to it. There is no intrinsic value to it. And that's been the biggest struggle for councils. Now, the second part to that is infrastructure. Plastic bottled water has marketed itself very cleverly. It's complete crap. So I'll try not to swear. It's complete crap how they market it. There's a certain brand that says it's inspired by clouds and added electrolytes and all this. And when you delve down into it deeply, it's distilled water, so it's tap water, goes through a distillation process. And they have to add electrolytes to it, otherwise it would be really bad for you. But it's all marketing spin, right? And so you can't spin tap water. If the council was in my area was to spin the tap water, it would be like, this week tastes a lot less like your pool than last week. Still tastes like your swimming pool, right? So infrastructure-wise, the problem is, everyone goes, oh, water should be free and it should be this. But there's a cost to everything. So if you turn around to the council and say, we want drinking fountains every 50 metres along every street, right, that's billions of dollars worth of cost. Now, if you're a city councillor, what are you going to spend money on? You're going to build a park, you're going to build a community centre, you're going to put a railway in, you're going to do visible things that people interact with that add value to their lives. Putting $1 billion worth of new pipes or water fountains in isn't going to get you votes, but putting a community centre in is. So the unfortunate thing is that I think that councils have undercapitalised on their water drinking infrastructure. I mean, Gold Coast City Council put in 14 water fountains along the waterfront around Burleigh and just got absolutely shafted in the news and online by people saying, oh, I can't believe you spent $10,000 on each of these, what a waste of money, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't think the problem is people don't appreciate the cost of infrastructure. I mean, our machines are $25,000 each, and there's a multi-million dollar resource in terms of R&D and development that's gone into those things. So the challenge for councils is you can't brand tap water. You're up against multinationals that have got very clever marketing strategies that are convincing people that by drinking this particular water, that's going to make you more appealing to the opposite sex, or tell people how amazing you are that you're drinking something that's been chipped off an iceberg in Iceland. So that's why Water3 is pretty important. We created a brand experience, and it needed to have value to it. So we looked at what water fountains are. They're very functional. They look very unhealthy. And then we looked at plastic bottled water and said, well, it's bad for the environment. There's an expiry date on it, right? But it's coming in a petrochemical derived product. So one would know that, something's going to leach into that water eventually, especially if water bottles are sitting in the sun. Plastic water bottles sit in the sun, there's chemicals going to leach into it. So we looked at the issues around that. We looked at the issues around tap water, and said right in the middle there sits an opportunity for Water3 to provide a water fountain that's got all FDA parts, NAMA certified, super hygienic, offering better quality water than what you get out of a bottle because it's not in plastic, without the environmental impact. It's not perfect. There's still a carbon price to it, but the offset for us is far greater. And offer it at a price point because we're vertically integrated. So you want to sell your own bottled water, you're up against Coke and all the other big guys to get into shelves and Coles and Woolies and what have you. So, that old retail model is pretty broken. So this one is direct to consumer. So, yeah, like I said, it's actually pretty complex when I describe it like that.
Definitely. And I think also, stop me if I'm wrong, Damien, but I think that location play an important role because I've actually recently located on the Gold Coast. So I've seen the actual kiosk, on the platform of the train station. And I know you are in shopping centers and all of kind of this very central location because that's really where I would want to refill my water bottle. Like I'm waiting for the train, and then so that's probably play an important role as well. That accessibility to the kiosk and looking at that as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to take into account with that. We look at and try and get deep into people's daily routines. So what does our typical customer look like, and what is their daily journey? So for some people, what we're finding is that they'll go into the G-Link where we've got kiosk on most of the stations. They won't fill up in the morning, but then they'll go to work. On the way back from work, they fill up because it's been pretty warm. So we look at data like that around when are our peak times and low times. During the Com Games was really interesting. The morning was sort of busy, then during the day really quiet, and then in the evenings it went crazy. But the shopping malls were pretty quiet, and then since Com Games, the shopping malls have picked right up again. The G-Link is ticking along. So the placements are pretty important. We've got schools lined up. We're in universities. Obviously, the light rail, which will lead us into further stuff with QR with a bit of luck, and talking with airports. Shopping malls are pretty important. Some public spaces, but then we're looking at other places as well. Where do people spend their recreation time and their leisure time? So then you've got things like theme parks. And to my mind, if you're an environmentally sensitive theme park, this is a no-brainer to have in there. Then you've got, driving ranges for golf, for example, holiday parks, camper van parks and what have you, surf clubs. There's actually so many places that we can go. But it's about, for us, we've been testing. We tested, our phase one was back in August 2016, and we tested our first generation of machines, learned a lot, rebuilt the machine completely to the ground up, rebuilt the complete back end. We're still, refocusing, rebuilding, or building a technology stack, but also now next month we start really focusing on the brand. So we actually haven't done any marketing to date. It's been very much pop them out there and just see what happens and let people discover them, and test a lot of our systems as well, because when we do invest heavily into the marketing side of it and we get a lot more volume than what we're getting now, we want to make sure that we've got the systems in place to deal with the upswing.
So thinking about that customer journey is really important.
Absolutely. As a business with purpose, which you highlighted at the beginning of the interview, how does Water3 ensure that it is working towards achieving the social mission of, reducing waste and making sure people have access to water, while still actually making a profit?
It was a really good question, and it's one of the things that social entrepreneurs sometimes battle with. Profit's not a dirty word. How you get to that profit is the dirty sentence, to my mind. Because for us, I'll give you an example. Social enterprise is a pretty broad swathe, right? So you've got at one end, you've got someone who's producing a particular product, and we can use the bottled water space as an example of that. They're producing a particular product that has a social outcome. Now, one could argue you're providing a social outcome, but you're having a detrimental environmental effect, which will then create a social problem. One could argue that another company is a social enterprise because they donate 5% of their profits to a certain charity. Is it a social enterprise? I don't know. It's, and that could be Coca-Cola. I mean, Coke donate a lot of money to charity, right? To my mind, and this is just my personal opinion because I think it's too broad a space to define, we can reasonably assume that if someone's refilling from one of our water stations, that they're not buying a plastic bottle. So we have a fairly reasonable assumption because people that will spend $1 with us aren't the sort of people who will drink out of a water fountain. That's why they come and spend $1 with us. We've got placements like on the G-Link, like possibly the one you saw, sits right beside a water fountain. So we balance and say, at one end, we've got this reasonable assumption that every time someone refills from us, we save a plastic bottle. Every time someone buys one of our bottles, we know it's going to save probably 100 plastic bottles from being made. So that's one part. During that customer journey with our new website, once you've registered an account with us, which links back to the bottle, you can add, $5, $10 credit, and you just scan the lid of the machine and say, hey, welcome back, Damien, you've got $10 credit. And part of that new customer journey within that, we actually track your usage and then align it with some outputs that we've got from an environmental company that measures the carbon output, measures the electrical saving, measures the water saving versus if you'd bought a plastic bottle. So there was an airport that announced that they'd sold 360,000 litres of bottled water. And from a carbon offset point of view, they would have had to plant 2,000 trees a week just to offset that. So what we're doing is we're tracking your contribution and then looking down the track to gamify that, to say, link up with your friends, create a community side sort of thing, and then understand who's got the best community of people. Like you look at over a period of a year, you and all your friends that have a Water3 account, planted or saved the equivalent of, 18,000 trees or something like that. And so we've got that part of it. So there's an education part. And then now the back end, we've created and I can't remember exactly where it's up to, but I know the paperwork's been done for a Water3 foundation. So 5% of our profits will go to the foundation. The foundation has an edict to do cleanup projects and fund different cleanup groups. Work with seabird rescue groups, ones that sort of help save turtles from their problems and seabirds and what have you. And then another part of the money goes to education and potentially developing water infrastructure in developing countries as well. So one impact up the front, one impact in the middle by tracking and education and the content that we deliver, and then number 3 at the back with a percentage of the profit that goes out.
That's very interesting, Damien, because the feedback that we often hear from social entrepreneurs is it's actually quite hard to communicate the impact that a social enterprise can have, and what you're seeing is that so your story is a really good example on how you're using the data that you're collecting in order to showcase that impact. So I think that's really, really interesting. Take us through what you consider, Damien, your worst entrepreneurial moment to date.
I will be honest, I did see these questions beforehand, and that's probably the one that I've really struggled with because I don't consider anything really bad. There's a couple of facepalm moments where I'm like, what are you thinking? They're all learning. Some of the stuff that I've done that you can never be taught it in a university, and the only way to really learn from some of the stuff is to make mistakes and make issues. One of the probably the key things that I've learned over the years and the number of different ventures that I've been involved with is that probably 2 things. One is I've got a saying that my mum used to teach me, or my mum taught me many years ago, and it was, if it's going to be, it's up to me. So the only person who's got responsibility for getting your stuff done is yourself. So you need to take responsibility and do it yourself. That kind of dovetails into my second part. If you're going to go into business with someone, they have to be as deeply bought into it as you. So I've been in business with people before who've had other companies and other projects, and what happens is they often will get distracted and go and fight the fire somewhere else. So whilst you're trying to get the startup going, they're off doing something like, trying to pay the rent or something like that, or they've got another company that they're having to jump back into every now and then. So if you're going to do it, you've got to go all in, and if you're going to bring someone else on board to be a founder, co-founder, you got to make sure that they're 100% into this thing, because there's nothing worse than coming up with a great idea, getting one or two other people involved, and then nothing happens because they just all, because they're distracted by other stuff they got going on.
That's very interesting, because that's another thing that we often hear is that entrepreneurs are renowned to have lots of great ideas, but the actual implementation of these ideas and following through with these ideas, that's the hard part. And I think that we all run the risk of getting distracted, having too many projects. So focus, I think, is the key from what I hear.
Yeah, and you know what? I reckon everybody's creative and everybody's got ideas. I think the trick is the actual commercialization of it. Is obviously a lot of places that you can go as an entrepreneur and go through, startup programs and what have you. The trick from there is the scale up side of it. So I went through a startup program and it was really good. It enabled us, myself especially, to assess where we'd really got ourselves to and understand where some of the gaps were. And there was I was actually really happy with what we'd already put together before we got in there. And it just reaffirmed a lot of the stuff that we knew, but it's good to have that check. But there seemed to be, until recently, a real lack of scale-up type facilitation in Australia. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges I think that entrepreneurs face in Australia, is to go from start-up, give it a seed capital, and then go to scale. And making that next leap has been our biggest challenge, I would say, is making that next leap. And we're right on that sort of hockey stick of growth at the moment, where we're about to implement a whole bunch of cool stuff, and hopefully we don't blow the whole thing up.
I was going to ask you, actually, it's interesting that you're mentioning that your startup program, because I was going to ask you, because I know that you're coming from the corporate world. Obviously, we've talked in the intro about these roles that you had before. So I was very curious about how you made the transition from the corporate world to becoming a social entrepreneur. And what I was going to ask you is, so was that startup program something that helped you to make that transition? And kind of what are the tips would you have for some of our social entrepreneur or aspiring social entrepreneur who wants to make that transition?
So just to clarify in regards to the corporate life, so the stuff I did with Coke and Schweppes, Pepsi Schweppes, Cadbury's, Heinz, was on behalf of I worked for an agency which had offices in Sydney and Auckland, and I was the client director. So I managed a lot of they'd come to me and say, hey, we want to take a brand from here in New Zealand. We want to take Steinlager to the US. So I'd rebranded Steinlager in the US and Hawaii. We want to take, what else did I do? I did home brew kits into China. So I was fortunate enough to work with really good marketing people in a lot of different types of organizations. So I got a really good base from that. I went into some consulting work, and the one thing I realized is that working for sort of smaller businesses was the common trait that I found was they really didn't like working for other people, and they just wanted to do their own thing, and they had a go. And I thought, you know what, I'm as clever as these people. There's no reason to stop me doing it. But it becomes a case of you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And where I found this Impact Academy accelerator thing was between me and my co-founder, we'd actually put a pretty good foundation in place in terms of what we had. For a lot of people, there was stuff they just didn't know. So we went into and sat down with a legal team, and the legal team was like, you've got to have X, Y, Z, A, B, and C. And all these people were sitting there going, oh, holy crap, I never even thought about that. I was sitting there going, okay, I got that. Oh, I don't have that. I better get that one. And so when there's a nice structured program like the Impact Academy one, it goes through sort of 11, 12 weeks and really double checks on what you've got, or if you don't have it, it teaches you why you need it and what you need it for. Because it's really until you jump into this, you don't know what you don't know, and you can listen to, you can read books and listen to podcasts and stuff, but your own situation is completely unique to you. So something like one of those programs, if you can get into them, will be invaluable for someone that's never done it before. But I mean, I'm a little bit different. Both me and my business partner have owned businesses in the past, so we kind of had a bit of a head start.
Absolutely. But I guess it's that giving you, as you say, I think that's a tip that's applicable to any sort of business, whether it's any sort of business, whether it's social enterprise or not, is you don't know what you don't know.
No, that's it. And those sort of accelerators, are really good for doing a bit of a health check, just seeing where you're at, what stage really is your idea at. Because, and I know this from my own history, and I see it quite a few times where people are like, hey, I've got a really great idea. I've got 50 grand in the bank, but I'm going to go raise $2 million for something. You sit there and go, shit. Oh, sorry. You sit there and go, oh man, you've got a lot to do before anyone's going to invest in you. And they sort of sit there and they go, but it's an amazing idea. I'm like, yeah, I know. But people don't invest in ideas anymore unless you've had amazing ideas before and made them really successful, in which case then they'll invest in your crazy ideas.
So if they don't invest in your idea, what do they invest on?
Well, it's an idea on a piece of paper, so.
That's right. We actually had a guest from Orange Sky Laundry on our third podcast who was talking about this exact idea that you're talking about, that people don't invest in idea, they invest in concept. And so for them, in their case, for example, they actually put their washing machine and dryer in a van, at the back of a van, and actually did a test, whether it's working or not, before actually going to see a sponsor to fund it.
Yeah. So that was our biggest challenge, is that to get proof of concept and that people would use what we do. No one ever built a machine like what we wanted. And there certainly wasn't any software existing to run it. And so, we had to invest pretty heavily. We had another business that did pretty well, and we didn't pay ourselves out of it, but we put all the profit into getting, the first sort of proof of concept up. We took a pretty big risk, but I was really convinced that people would refill from our stations if they were, appropriately branded and structured correctly. And I was right. And now we've got proof of concept with our new generation of machines. It's like the Orange Sky Laundry guys. Once you can show that people will actually use it, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, first gen machines were not perfect. You're so much further ahead than anyone else because you can actually point to data and just say, well, there's my van with a laundry in it. Okay, well, you have it, and here's the data of it being used. Okay, well, that's proof of concept. That is so much more valuable than an idea.
Absolutely. And so Water3 kiosks are expanding quite rapidly. Both Mel and I have seen it in our home of Southeast Queensland. And from what I can gather, you have exciting plans for the US. You did mention that a little bit there. Singapore, Switzerland, and Dubai. So tell us what you see as being Water3's biggest challenge in the next 12 months.
So we haven't taken on any outside equity at all. So ourselves, the biggest challenge at the moment for us would be, how do we approach this next phase of growth? So it's one thing to go and sell, $500,000 a week with an operator in the US, but then at the backside of that, how do you appropriately resource the support to help them, and then how do you pay for that resource? So with each period of growth, is making sure that there's appropriate funding in place. Now, if we hit our business plan, we won't require any outside equity, but we bring some stuff in place just in case we've got to go raise $10 or $15 million in the next couple of months. Then we've got the pitch deck and forecast and all the stuff there ready to do it. So that's probably our biggest challenge is if we can cash flow that growth into other markets. Then we don't take on equity. But if we take on equity, obviously we lose part of the business, and but we put a rocket under it as well. So there's no book to tell you when to do it. I speak to mentors and I take advice and I listen to people who have been in similar situations. But that for us right now is probably causing the biggest amount of consternation. So we're just kind of running both strategies at the moment and seeing which one works first.
You got to give it a go to know.
Oh, yeah, and that's one of the things I think that, I spent 4.5 years broke as a broken stick because I just really believed that this thing would work. And I didn't want to die wondering. I didn't want to have a regret of not giving it a proper nudge. I mean, I ended up homeless for 3 months. There's a storm that came through Brisbane and ripped my neighbour's roof off and put it through my roof. And effectively just stayed on, house sat and stayed on friends' couches and bits and pieces for 3 months. So it was me and the dog, the suitcase and the dog, bag food in the Jeep, house sitting and bits and pieces for 3 months because I just firmly believed that this would work. So it's funny. You read articles and people go, I failed 100 times before I did this, or I was homeless, and I'm like, yeah, all right, that's a bit extreme. That'll never happen to me. And then 3 days later, someone else's roof was through my roof and my lounge flooded. I was like, oh no.
I think Mel's lounge room got flooded in that same storm.
It did. So I can feel the pain.
So we are coming to the end of the interview. So for our final questions, we always like to do a bit of a lightning round and just ask our guests to tell us the first thing that comes to their minds. And so our first question, and this doesn't have to be about Water3 if it isn't your genuine answer, but what is the thing that you're most excited about today?
The thing that I'm most excited about today is finishing before 5:30 and going home to my lovely fiancée, my stepson, and my dog.
Aww. What was the one thing that was holding you back from starting Water3?
Money.
Fair.
Yeah.
What is the best advice that you've ever received?
If it's going to be, it's up to me.
Oh, I love it. Got to stick with mum. And so if you could leave us with a few words that our listeners would really take to heart today, what would they be?
The beauty about social enterprise is that you get out of bed in the morning because you're making a difference. I've had months where I haven't paid myself anything, and I've had months where I'm worried about, paying wages and all the rest of it. And the one thing that keeps me going every time is because it's a social enterprise. I know that it's going to make a difference to the planet and I'm going to leave a legacy. And it's not ego-based. It's just feeling like a better human for it. And there's no salary that you could pay me on the face of the planet to go and work for someone else in a job that didn't have that outcome in mind. So if you really believe that you really believe in what you're doing, just go and do it. Because the one thing that gets a lot of people on board with what we do is this infectious authenticity that I bring in my staff have as well now, is that this authenticity about what we're doing. You can't do that with a $250,000 wage and say, oh, come on, we'll do this. The authenticity is it. You don't have that unless you really believe in what you're trying to do.
And before we let you go, Damien, so tell us what's the best way to reach out to you and either find a Water3 kiosk near us or actually request one in our area?
What's the best way to get hold of me? Probably through our Facebook page, which is Water3 Global. That's the easiest way to get hold of us, just because I'm not in the country very much. But that's monitored 24/7. We've got internal people watching that. And we get a lot of really good communication from people that want to, have kiosks here or expand overseas or whatever. So, yeah, just through the Facebook page, Water3 Global, will find its way to me pretty quickly.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the Human Factor podcast, Damien. It's been an absolutely enlightening chat.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks very much for having me on. It's been very humbling and flattering to be requested to come on here.
The goodie bag. With no further ado this month, what are you putting in the goodie bag, Mel?
So I'm putting in the goodie bag a TED Talk that I've seen about a Japanese preschool that has no wall. So basically, there's no boundaries between inside and outside. And even in the actual classroom, there's no partition. So I really like this idea of this kind of open air concept. It gets the kids to run around up to 2.5 miles a day. And my brain cannot think in what that means in kilometers.
I have no idea.
But that means that they're getting a lot of physical activity. And I think for kids, it's very, very important. And if we compare with American kids, they only get between 5 and 7 minutes. Which is nothing. And it also promotes social interaction. And on that, it really made me think that when I study at my university, it was purposely built for knowledge. So basically, we had round tables, so it was a lot easier to do our group work. The university was really open, and it was a really good place to learn. And what I found is coming back to the city where I teach, we have great classrooms, don't get me wrong, but they are the traditional type of classrooms. So the rows and obviously it's not open air because it's in the city. And I found that it's a very different atmosphere to learn. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, and it's really cute. So we will share that on Facebook and our social media.
Because we see the kids, 40 kids at one time in a tree. It's adorable. What are you putting in the goodie bag?
Well, I'm putting in something a lot less cute. I'm putting in a composting bucket. So no, I'm actually putting in a business called the Cuda Bucket. And that is a business that's based in Perth in Western Australia. And basically, it's a composting bucket service. So for those of you who compost, you might know that you collect your food scraps at the end of the night, and then you might have worms or a composting bucket that breaks it down, and then you put it on your garden, but which is awesome. But for those of us who live in like an apartment or even, commercial kitchens and those sorts of things that don't have the capacity to compost themselves, it means that all that food waste is just going into landfill. And actually contributing to greenhouse gas emissions quite heavily. So a chemical engineer in Perth, a mum, she started Cuda Bucket, which is a bucket service where you can fill up your compost bucket and then they will come and collect it and divert it into, yards that need the compost. And it was created in the vision of seeing the diversion of food waste from landfill, but it also creates employment for people who are unable to work standard work hours. So you can be really flexible by picking it up. And the reason why I love this is because I live in an apartment, but it's always been a goal. A goal sounds weird, but it is a goal of mine to have a worm farm and have my own composting, because I hate seeing how much food scraps I throw out. And I wish that this service existed in Brisbane because I would be signing up. But hopefully they'll get here. And so that's what I'm putting in the goodie bag.
Lovely.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit subscribe or leave us a review on iTunes. We would recommend rating us 5 stars. Or you can head over to our page, Human Factor Podcast, on Instagram or Facebook and join in the conversation. Tell us what you thought of today's episode. And if you have any thoughts or insights to add to anything Damien said today, leave us a comment.
Or you can find us on Twitter @_Human Factor, or visit the website, our brand new website at humanfactor.com.au, and leave us a message. This show is just one part of a community that really wants to affect and grow social change. So if you have a topic or a person that you'd like us to feature on the show, let us know.
You're all awesome, and we'll see you next time.